We're not trying to replace NFTs. We're actually kind of, if you think about it, more like a layer two for NFTs. We're bringing extra functionality, extra scalability to the NFT, ecosystem.
Hey man, thanks a lot for joining. This is fantastic that you've accepted my invitation. As I mentioned before, this is the first episode of Proof of Talk. So thanks for being the first one to join. Stoked to have you, man.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's quite interesting how we met on Reddit really randomly, and I think we connected really well. So thanks for having me on.
No, 100%. I like the fact that from the start we kind of had this synergy. You could tell that there's, like genuine interest in is kind of what I want to make this space about. I just want to talk to people about the crypto projects that they're involved in, the tech, and any other crypto and tech related discussions. When we were talking initially last week, I think you said that it was music that eventually got you into crypto. And I thought that's pretty cool. So I was just wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, look, I come from a music background. Actually, so before music, I come from film and TV. So I did that for
Right.
many years. And I was also a developer at the time. I was like really into the whole like multimedia thing. At the .com era. I was, gosh, showing my age a little bit here now. But when I was 16, around the .com era, I won tickets to go see Bill Gates talk. And I went alone, and I just like he was talking about how video and film and TV and interactivity and websites were going to connect to each other, and it was all going to
Right.
become one thing. And at the time, nobody knew what that meant, but obviously he was so correct about the
Yeah,
future.
he was right. Yeah.
He was so right, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and he's a genius, as far as I'm concerned. He saw where technology is headed. That
Oh yeah.
inspired me to pursue careers in all the different fields of media. Whatever it is, I've always loved being around media. So I worked in film and TV, and I worked later on in a bunch of digital advertising agencies, especially ones in the financial industry. Did a lot
Hmm.
of finance, marketing. Then my DJ career took off, and I did that for like a decade, and I worked with some of the biggest artists in the world. Went to the Grammys, did all sorts of crazy stuff, and
That's
then the
crazy.
pandemic. Sorry.
That's crazy. I thought I knew you were talking about it, and you said that you worked with some of the biggest artists, like in like the DJs and people in electronic music. I didn't realize that you were making music yourself. I thought you had more of like a producer or like band manager kind of role in that.
Yeah, I mean, you wear a lot of hats in the music industry, and
Right.
I started off while I was DJing and touring. I discovered a young dude who became Flume. He's a huge electronic
Right.
artist from Australia, and through working with him and him blowing up, I got to work with like Marshmello and Skrillex and all these people that I really look up to. And then as I was releasing my own music, the pandemic hit, and that kind of like made me realize, hey, I can't tour right now. Australia was, I don't know if you guys know, but Australia was very locked down.
Oh yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
that where people just being fined even if they posted about it on Facebook or something like that.
I
Like
was
they,
not allowed to go more than 5 kilometers from my house. It was crazy. So what do? I'm like, I want to make extra money. I want to do this, trade
yeah,
crypto. It was the bull run.
yeah, the
But
fallback.
then, yeah, and then like next thing you know, I went into a Telegram chat room for this team called LTO, and I was like, yo, this project is nothing like anything else I've seen in crypto. Like everything else in crypto, there's people promise things but don't actually have anything to show.
Yeah.
You know, LTO had like tech that working with the United Nations, with IBM, with Dutch government, Chamber of Commerce, all these kind of people. And I went in the chat room. I'm like, hey, I've got all these crazy ideas. I want to talk to you guys. I want to talk to you guys. And only because I just wanted to pump my own bags. But eventually, I don't remember how, but someone connected me to Rick, and Rick said, "Hey, you've got a lot of dope ideas. We're looking for someone like you. Do you want to be involved?" And it kind of grew from there. And yeah, I'm pretty grateful that that opportunity happened.
Oh yeah, it's crazy how things happen. How you kind of come across something because of like a bloody pandemic. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, I was doing a bit of music promotion at the time, just before the pandemic. I was working with a few rock and metal bands around London, and I was a band manager for one of them. It was pretty fun because we actually got to record their third album. So it was my kind of my first time experiencing like the inside of a music studio and jamming,
Sick.
and you kind of get to meet all these crazy individuals that are really cool. There was this one guy. I was a producer who bought a church and converted it into a house, and I was like, man, that's so cool.
Yeah, there's
Making
a lot of characters in the scene, and everyone's like, I mean, I used to work in finance, and no offense, but like a lot of people, like just very similar personalities. Not everybody, obviously, but
yeah.
the entertainment scene, there's some wild people out there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. I
Are you
think the
still doing
finance
stuff with
industry.
the bands? Are you still connected to them, or?
Not anymore. So it kind of slowed down. We talk a little bit, but it's kind of all slowed down after COVID. Well, during the pandemic, because like touring stopped. We was full lockdown in the UK as well, and then I kind of moved away from music and got like into crypto, and I got into development because I suddenly
Oh.
had all of this. Like I had to be inside. I had to spend time indoors. So like, how can I entertain myself? There's only so many games you can play. So I got into a bit more into building my own trading bots, and I built a few
Wow.
cryptocurrency trading bots, and
Oh,
I
that's right.
built.
I remember checking out your website. So you built that yourself. So okay, you actually like coded that yourself.
Yeah, the Aesir, the project's built by six developers. There's six of us.
Yeah.
So it's an algorithmic trading platform, and people can like, if you have a trading strategy, you can go and you can automate your trading strategy on there.
Wow.
Um, but that kind of took 2 years to build, which was just right after I was just building open source bots and I was releasing them on Reddit. And I thought, man, like people like this kind of stuff. I should do more of it. I built one that would buy Bitcoin every time Elon Musk would tweet about it. Uh, it, it,
That's
it was
crazy.
it was the post that got me to the first front page of Reddit because of it, and that's when I released that, and then a lot of people had kind of trouble using that software, or the Binance, the one that trades like based on volatility on Binance, and I thought, well, what this needs is a UI. But then there were so many people talking about this thing that we just started talking on Reddit, and then we decided, okay, let's just start this company and let's just build something together.
That's insane.
So
You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. During the last bull run or whatever, I had a Twitter alert set up for any time Elon Musk tweeted anything. I would just quickly run and just quickly buy Doge, and then 5 minutes later sell it, and I would always make a little profit.
oh yeah, 100%. He still does that. Like every time he tweets about some coin or something, like the market still pump. I think it's absolutely unreal that that's a thing.
Do you think that it's all the bots that people have still got set up? Like, there's probably like no people doing it. It's just bots that are programmed to go when he's talking about
Oh
stuff to
yeah,
buy it, and it's a
100%.
self-fulfilling bot prophecy. Yeah.
There's definitely bots doing that. There's also an inverse Kramer ETF sort of a thing. It's like,
Oh yeah, the financial guy from
right,
yeah.
that basically whenever he says something, the exact opposite happens. So if he says like sell your bags, Bitcoin's going down, that's the time to just buy more Bitcoin because it's definitely gonna pump. So yeah, it's like the market's a bit crazy, and then I think it's all moving to kind of like automate the trading that people do.
Oh, it's
Like
impossible
if
to keep track of on like I don't like since I joined LTO I barely trade. Like I've got one dude who I
yeah,
follow and he's a friend of the LTO project. Shout out to Han,
hey Han.
but hey Han, how you doing? He's a really cool dude. And but like I only do that just out of being connected to a little bit of what the trading world's about. But yeah, automated stuff is probably where it's going to go. I agree.
Yeah. And from what I've seen from our previous discussions, you're one of the co-founders of or the founding members of the LTO.
So I'm part of the management team. I'm the chief marketing officer at LTO. The team has
Yeah.
been around for a couple of years before I joined. So originally it was founded by Rick Schmitz and Arnold,
Hmm.
Arnold Daniels. Arnold is our head of technology, and the original project idea was to make a blockchain that was useful for enterprise technology. So the team had a strong background. Like Rick comes from Deloitte, so he was in mergers and acquisitions. Arnold used to do a lot of,
Right.
app development in the corporate area. And the idea was, hey, blockchain technology, companies that are pretty serious are interested in it, but they don't really know how to deal with blockchain. So let's make a blockchain network and a company surrounding the network, which can help these enterprise solutions, deal with blockchain a little bit. We've moved
Right.
considerably since then. We found quite early on that there was a lot of interest, especially around 2019, in the areas of anchoring and data protection and the immutability, and a lot of companies were just throwing R&D money into these sorts of things. But as the technology has matured and companies realizing, okay, what is it that we need to do to actually, what does the bottom line, really mean for us? Then the pandemic hit, and then the inflation and all these things. Companies are asking, where is the real value in blockchain? And so that's where
Right.
our start was, and that's where we've evolved to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I like the fact that what you're kind of the with the way you're positioned, you're in between a private and a public blockchain. So you have a public ledger that can contain private information, private data, if I got that correctly.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and it took me when I joined a little while to understand how powerful this is. So, the hybrid architecture that we have, there's a public ledger where the records, go like a typical blockchain, but there's a private
Yeah.
layer where the applications that are on our blockchain can pass data back and forth to each other or itself without revealing that information to the public. So, what does that mean? That means that you can have stuff where personal information, identity data, all this stuff is dealt with by the application, but it no longer needs to be, shared with the rest of the world. And what that means really is that we can be regulatory friendly, so we can comply with GDPR regulations in Europe. We're probably going to be very easily capable of dealing with the MiCA laws that are coming
Right.
up. And right now, the future of blockchain is starting to become a little bit more regulated, and I think we're in a perfect position to do that because of our structure.
Yeah, well, it does feel like regulation has gone crazy for the last like few months. Like all I see whenever I go on like Twitter is just new stuff coming out in terms of crypto regulation. We've got in Europe, we have like it does feel like there's a lot of regulation, especially when it comes to exchanges. For instance, Binance, it's just slowly getting out of the UK in the sense that they were allowed to you were allowed until a few months ago to deposit and withdraw GBP. Now you can't do either of those things.
Oh,
You
wow.
can't stake in the UK. They've withdrawn from Australia, Jesus, from Austria, and they're also withdrawing from the Netherlands as well. So it does seem like there's a lot of movement in there. Um,
Yeah, and it's interesting what'll happen. Like in Australia as well. I know we sound like Austria, but yeah, we Binance is no longer able to do fiat on ramp or off ramping anymore because
right.
their banking partner pulled out in Australia due to reasons separate to Binance. But it just means that the crypto space is starting to come under more scrutiny, and I actually think
Yeah.
that's a good thing. Uh, like in a perfect world, crypto and blockchain and cryptocurrencies would be completely decentralized, but
Yeah.
the market has spoken that a lot of people feel comfortable with some centralized structures existing. So when you have a company like Binance and a centralized structure, look at what happened to FTX. There was no
Yeah.
oversight. Obviously, Binance has done a lot, and we work closely with Binance, and we feel very confident in their ability to be compliant with these things in the future. But really, these
Yeah.
laws are there to protect the consumer, and I guess there's a balance between the freedom, wild west of crypto that
Yeah.
anybody can do what they want. But at the end of the day, there are people who are losing their money, and these do need to be balanced. And technology will help the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree. And it's challenging to strike a balance between allowing decentralization and allowing like a free system to operate independently, and then ensuring that there's no like scam coins coming up every day. Like
Yeah.
99% of the market, of the crypto market, is actually just scam coins. If you look at it, it's ridiculous. Or coins or tokens with no utility. Definitely some regulation is needed. I'm not sure the SEC is doing the best job at it for the time being. But yeah, I completely agree.
Thing is, they're not doing the best job at it, but they're not doing a poor. They're just not doing anything, and it's not clear. And that clarity, like, I don't think there's anybody who's a serious project or a serious business in the blockchain crypto space that is not ready to be complying, and doesn't,
Yeah.
like all the serious projects really want to be, looking for 5, 10 years in the future. And without the clarity on what the rules and regulations are, how do you do that? Like, that's impossible. So the SEC's suddenly come out of nowhere, claiming that there's all these things that people have to comply with, but they don't really pertain to crypto. They might make sense for assets and financial stuff that existed from like in 1910, until like 2000s. But crypto's a whole different thing. The crypto asset um, is so much more functional and it can bring a lot more. And the old rules don't really work.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, how do you regulate something that's completely new and you're trying to fit it into a paradigm that's been around for hundreds of years? You know, it's uncharted territory for sure.
Yeah,
So
and it
going
scares the
back
big
to
boys.
yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it does look like crypto's becoming less of a wild west, and you bringing that institutional money into crypto. We've got like the BlackRock ETF and all the other like big venture capitalists like looking to have some stake in crypto. It's becoming less and less wild west, and that's a good thing. I also know that decentralized maxis would prefer it to be like, I know people that prefer it to be a wild west, and I know people that prefer it to be regulated, and I'm like, oh, where do I stand with this? Like, I'm somewhere in the middle, really.
Well, this is where technology, as I said, will help things. And for example, um, I'm going to go into a little bit of shill mode here, but we've got like a technology that places like Dexes can use, where users can still participate with their wallets and they can still do things like KYC, but they can protect their
Yeah,
private data. And these are things that our network can do. And we looked at the problems that are coming up, in a few years, and we realized identity is like a big, big, big deal. And
yeah.
this is the thing, technology is going to help solve some of this stuff. But what we're seeing though is everybody's kind of like sitting on the sidelines because no one knows exactly what the final laws and regulations are going to be. So, nobody knows what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, with your LTO network, just as a practical example of this distinction between the private and the public layer, for instance, if I were to transfer you crypto using the LTO network or any kind of token, would the ledger record a transaction but not record a wallet? Is there like, where does the privacy layer come into play?
Okay. So the privacy layer comes in the applications that people can develop on our chain. So the coin token stuff, that's all public. And we're not like Monero or anything like that where you
Right.
can hide. So that we're not doing
Right.
that. It's really about the applications, and we're not trying to be a cryptocurrency. There's a tokenomics involved with LTO, and
Sure.
there's a coin which is speculatory, etc. But at the end of the day, we're not trying to use LTO as a payment system for
Yeah.
daily goods and services. Okay, there is a payment system for applications on LTO. So if you have an application that uses our network, you pay a transaction fee. Okay, and those
Right.
transaction fees are essentially where the payment system comes in. But really, where the privacy comes in is if you write an application on the LTO network that deals with identity and data and personal information and sensitive information, you
Hmm.
can deal with that in a really elegant way. So look at one of our software applications that we're releasing publicly soon called Proofy.
Right.
Proofy allows you to do a KYC on a wallet without getting any of the customer information. So let's say I know I'm an NFT project, okay, and I want to know that I'm only selling NFTs or allowing minting of NFTs to people that are in France and they're over 18. Okay, so how do I do that so I can comply with my local laws? Well,
Right.
Proofy, the project asked Proofy, hey, can you Proofy this wallet? And when you do that, Proofy will take the wallet information and take the user through a KYC process through a third party. The data comes back to Proofy. Proofy analyzes all of that, then records on the blockchain whether or not that person is eligible to participate. It gives them what's called
Right.
a verifiable credential, which is kind of like a thing that they can keep forever to say, um, this is my result. And it tells the project yes or no, they're allowed to participate. It doesn't give their name, doesn't give their address, doesn't give their age or any of that details. It simply says yes or no, they met your criteria. Now, the project can then go to regulatory people and say, hey, we use Proofy for this system. If there is some sort of a legal requirement, like say the project gets, I don't know, government audited, or there's concerns about some money laundering or some problems like that with the project, the government can use the typical, I guess, laws which allow them to get information to then request that information from Proofy about that individual customer, but the project doesn't get that information. So let's say places like online casinos, online gaming, a lot of places where you probably don't want to give your personal information over
Yeah.
and over and over, your passport picture, all these things that are sensitive to you and people can then use to steal your identity. You don't want to give that to every project you come across. So you would use Proofy, and our network allows you to do that.
That's fascinating. It's incredible that you guys are able to balance out this sort of private and also keep it GDPR compliant and everything. Is Proofy, or do you guys have plans to bring this kind of technology for like cross chain compatibility, or do you have to only use the LTO network to benefit from that?
Luckily, we've got a partnership with Chainlink. So we're using their network to make that data available cross chain. We'll also create
Right.
our own bridges to any chains that they don't cater for. So ultimately, that user information about the yes or no can be queried by like an EVM project, on Ethereum, or by a Binance Smart Chain project through the Chainlink integration.
Right.
Yeah,
That's really cool. So from
yeah,
what
it is
I've read
pretty cool.
from your white paper is you've got something called, because this basically this technology you're applying it in different ways. So using it on Proofy to KYC people is one application of this technology, but you also have your own take on NFTs, and you're calling them ownables, right?
They're actually not ownables are really interesting because when we first came up with the light paper for it, we thought that it would be a replacement for NFTs technically. Um,
Yeah, because they're called
uh,
NFTs 2.0, at least in the light paper.
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and obviously, like when you go through the development phase and the R&D phase of tech, you realize some limitations, but then you realize opportunities as well. And where we saw ownables. Okay, what ownables are essentially, it's a digital collectible that you own and you choose where it is. So the problems that we looked at, I asked Arnold a couple of years ago. I was like, hey, what can we do in the NFT space? And he said, it's all hype, hype, hype. I said, look, yeah, sure, but clearly there's a community of people interested in digital collectibles. So what can we solve as with these problems that NFTs have? And we looked at the problems from NFTs. One of them was that anybody can copy the content. So the image, like if it's a JPEG or an audio, is publicly available. So the intellectual
Right.
property and the copying and screenshotting, all that sort of stuff, is a problem that has been there from day one. The other one is you don't choose where it is. So the NFT project that creates it and the marketplaces, they connect you to the asset. So quite often you can get like 404s. You could lose your assets. There's a lot of problems that can happen
Yeah,
with your
100%.
NFT.
Not to mention that I've seen collections using AWS buckets to store their images, just kind of weird considering that's probably as far as you can go away from decentralization.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
who knows what will happen? And if the project dies, then your NFT is kind of worthless in the future. So for us, anything that you can completely own and control has some intrinsic value. So
Yeah.
let's say that the original creator disappears, the whole project's completely gone, but you still have the asset, and maybe in 50 years, a new metaverse application or some game will come and say, "Hey, I will support this ownable that was created in 2023," and the value is retained. Um, so what it is again is it's a digital collectible that you control where it lives. It can be on an IPFS, it can be in your hard drive, it can be in your own digital wallet, which we're developing. Um, but the other thing that it does is a technology called consumables. Okay, so with
Right.
NFTs, you can do some dynamic stuff. It's incredibly complicated to do it really well. Typically, you need a website which does all these sort of things, and there's a lot of dev power that goes into making NFTs dynamic, and they're quite limited in how much dynamic aspects you can bring. So
Yeah.
ownables, each ownable is its own CosmWasm smart contract, and they're highly functional. There's a lot you can do with it. You can have an embedded widget. You can have ownables that consume other ownables. So let's just
Right.
say, I don't know, you've got a potion in a video game, and one ownable is a character in a video game. It can consume another ownable, and it can consume it. And once that ownable is consumed, it's gone forever. Now, for game creators and content creators, that gives them an incentive to come up with crazy new ideas of things that they can do with this technology beyond what NFTs can currently do. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating what we're able to achieve with it. It's just in the infancy. We launched the SDK for
Right.
it only a few weeks ago. um, there's a whole fully functional wallet that's going to go with it, and we believe that projects, like we're talking to projects that NFT projects that haven't done so well in the bear market, over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and they're saying, "Hey, we can't afford to get devs to keep growing our project ideas, but we've got really cool creative ideas." Well, Ownable solves that because all the hardcore tech stuff happens automatically inside the wallet. They don't necessarily need a dev to keep
Right.
the project going onwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens on the chain once an ownable consumes a consumable? Basically, does that get burned? Does that get sent to a burn address or something?
So essentially, the event gets recorded on the public ledger side of things.
Uh-huh.
So the amount of potion remaining goes down to zero, and that's recorded publicly.
Right.
And so anybody who receives that ownable or looks at it will see that it is there's nothing left in it, essentially. Um, this kind of tech is also used for. I was talking about the privacy aspect, which is something that's really important. Um, you can have like say it's a piece of art, and
Yeah.
the actual art itself, whoever owns the ownable can see the full art, but the wallet and the public can see like maybe a cropped or a blurred or a low res version. If it's a movie, it could be like just a short version of the movie, but the owner gets to see the whole length, and that's because
Right.
the full package is on the private layer, but the cropped version or the cut down version is on the public layer.
That's really cool. Like, and that's also something that I feel a lot of marketplaces are struggling with when it comes to creating like a web friendly, web optimized NFT marketplace. I work in marketing. I work with an art gallery, and we're doing like NFT projects, and we have our own marketplace. And I'm quite involved in the tech side of it as well. So one of the issues that I'm seeing right now, if you're looking at NFTs that are minted either on are hosted either on IPFS or Arweave, is that you're more or less forced to take the metadata and then display whatever comes from the metadata. And most artists only work with the original file. Like, no one's actually going to create a custom metadata and add a preview of your video. So that creates a lot of overhead for us. Like, do we offload this image? Do we use like a middleware or something to optimize the size of it? Because it's really quite challenging to do. You have so many videos that all want to load at the same time, and
Yeah.
then like the marketplace can literally like break your page.
And in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, the previews you have now may not be sufficient.
Right.
Yeah. One thing that's really worth mentioning, and I forgot to add that when you were asking about if we're trying to be a replacement for NFTs. So ownables, when you create an ownable, what happens is uh, you build the ownable,
Yeah.
and it creates the ownable on our network, but it also creates a matching Ethereum NFT for it. Okay, so the NFT is married to the ownable, and what happens is you can use the NFT on a public marketplace, and somebody can sell that to another person, etc. And whoever's got the NFT can go to our bridge and claim the ownable. You know, so the
Right.
two technologies, yeah. So that's what I meant. We're not trying to replace NFTs. We're actually kind of, if you think about it, more like a layer two for NFTs. We're bringing extra functionality, extra scalability to the NFT, ecosystem. So there's no point trying to replace NFTs completely. There's too
Of
many
course.
people that are using it. The technology is entrenched, but we're adding to it.
No, that's that. I think that's really cool. I think that also I can see a really interesting use case for consumables in well, in gaming, but especially in MMO gaming, right? You could have decentralized servers that are kind of, they're all aware of each ownables type of consumables, and then yeah, you could play around with some pretty cool things there. Like you could really give people the freedom to create like decentralized MMO games, or things that are not possible right now in gaming. And I'm yet to see like a really cool like blockchain based gaming experience.
Like you could have a character who is in an MMO game, but then outside of the game, you could even have like its own thing where you could, like, I don't know, let's say it's a horse. You could
Yeah.
feed that horse in your wallet, and you could give it skills and special features and stuff like that without even having to go in the game. And that becomes
Right.
something that you take with you while you're just sitting on the bus. Then you go back home and you're connected to your laptop or whatever, your VR goggles, and then your horse has evolved since then. And that's stuff you can't do at the moment.
Yeah, and not to mention that you're probably creating a system that's unhackable. Like I'm not playing MMOs anymore because I don't really have time. I used to play a few MMOs back in the day. I spent way too many hours on something called Cabal Online, and it's just a classic MMO. You grow, you build your character, you grind hours and hours and hours on skills and gear, and then at the time I remember you were able to, if you really knew your way around the application, you could basically break it to duplicate items. Like you could dupe your loot. Like if you got a cool sword, you could just like put it in your inventory, remove it from your inventory really
Right.
quickly.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm guessing this would basically not exist anymore. You wouldn't be able to hack or like
Yeah, correct. Each
duplicate
individual,
items.
like ownable, is it's an immutable, unhackable item. Somebody could make a fake one, but if the project doesn't support it, it doesn't support it. We've come up with additional stuff that's on our roadmap. One thing that I'm really excited about is our Proofy technology can KYC individuals, but it can also KYC businesses. Um,
Hmm.
so let's say you've got a KYC on a business. Let's say, I don't know, Nike.
Right.
You're like, okay, so this wallet is the official Nike wallet, and we've proven that through business credentials. Okay, then Nike wants to issue some ownables, like a bunch of different sneakers or whatever,
Right.
digital sneakers. Proofy will be able to then connect to the ownable, and you will know that the ownable that you're buying or you own is from the real Nike.
Right.
Yeah. So in
Right.
the case of your game, you could be like, hey, that sword is really the one that's issued by whoever the game company is, and it's the real authentic one, not a copy, not a hack. It's the real original one. And that brings real value to these collectibles, in my opinion.
No, 100%. It's crazy we're not doing that right now. It's crazy that you've got a layer on top of, like, you've got OpenSea that verifies wallets or whatever other marketplaces, but it's crazy that, like, on Ethereum at least, you don't really know whose wallet is who, right? And I guess that's part of having it, sort of anonymous but also public. Have you? I think a few months ago, Ethereum and Vitalik were talking about like adding a privacy layer to the Ethereum chain. Have you guys thought about how that might play out with your network in case it does happen? I'm not sure. I think it was just a discussion. I'm not sure if it was like an actual proposal on the chain.
Yeah, look, I've seen a few different things come across. One of them is I'm not sure about if it's the exact same thing that we're talking about, but I've also seen a proposal that allows additional dynamic, and privacy stuff for NFTs. But at the end of the day, it starts to become a lot of overhead for projects, and developers who have to create this stuff. So the way that we're doing it is the consuming uh, let's say you've got a car and you want to give it a paint,
Right.
in your game or whatever. That consumption happens in our wallet. The game can do it as well, but you can if you're a small developer and you don't have the resources to add a whole Web3 component into your application to your game. Um, you can let the wallet handle that, and that
Right.
offloads all that dev work and makes it so much easier for you to do that.
Right. So I don't know how techy you want to go into this, but what are some of the, like, if I wanted to write a smart contract on the LTO network, what language would I have to use for that?
Yeah, this is definitely, yeah, going way too tech for me, But at the end of the day, I know that like just any general full stack developer is able to develop apps on our network. The ownable stuff, it's a CosmWasm smart contract, which is it's JavaScript esque, from what I understand. I'm not a developer; I'm a
Right.
marketing guy.
Right.
It is JavaScript esque, but it does require dev knowledge. But the way that we're doing things different is we're actually implementing tools and creating stuff so content creators don't always need to go in and do it the hard way. Like before, you got to go in, you got to get a developer. If you're a graphic designer, you kind of can't do it alone. You need a bit of a help to get these things. We're trying to build
Yeah.
a range of tools to allow people to create ownables, and not just basic ownables, but full featured ownables with most of the use cases that we can imagine, just through click, drag and drop.
That's cool. I like that. So people would just be able to create their own thing from scratch on the chain without any kind of outsourcing any sort of developer experience or anything like
Correct.
that.
Yeah, yeah. That's
That's
like
great.
the ideal perfect dream.
Yeah, no, 100%. So what are some of the specifications of the chain, or like what's usual transaction fee or cost to create a smart contract, or like
Look, generally most things cost less than one LTO, which at the moment is about 6 or 7 cents. These transaction fees are able to be. There's two things you can do. You can batch transactions,
right,
so you can have up to 999 records done in one transaction if your app is able to be efficient enough to do that. Um, but other than that, if we're realizing that the cost of transactions becomes an impedance to the network growth, the nodes can vote on the cost of the transactions. So
right,
they can make it a port like half an LTO if they want or whatever. But we're not seeing that as an issue at the moment. It was in the past. It used to be before the batching. Used to cost projects a lot. So we've got a lot of projects that are still doing anchoring and stuff from our enterprise, core, and we've still got some more anchoring stuff coming up, especially with like land registration, etc. And these projects,
right.
the batching helps them keep the costs down, but essentially it's like one ownable under one LTO. Yeah.
So for
You will
people
have
who
to
don't,
sorry, you will have to pay some gas fees for the NFT aspect of it though that gets created, but you don't have to get an NFT made for it if you don't want to have ownables married to Ethereum.
oh, you mean like if you wanted to have you wanted to have it on Ethereum, then you'd pay the Ethereum gas fee. Yeah, that makes
Correct.
sense.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just gonna ask you, what do you mean by anchoring for people that don't know?
So anchoring is essentially it's recording a line of data, one piece of block of data to the blockchain. Okay. So if you think of
Right,
like an Excel spreadsheet, one row of stuff can get recorded on the blockchain. Nobody can touch that forever. It's immutable. It's
right,
locked into the blockchain. Um, in the past, in our enterprise past, a lot of stuff that we piloted, we did stuff with the Dutch government, IBM, lot of sort of like enterprise people where they they were using old systems to share data and manage data, and then the costs of securing and verifying and maintaining the integrity of that data was quite expensive. So they did a lot of pilots on LTO network to test out things like, for example, I think there was a waste management, application. There's a
Right.
real estate companies and all sorts of different companies that are using LTO. Some were in pilot, some are still continuing, and they record that data on the blockchain and the management of that data and keeping it secure and safe. They don't have to do backups and all these sorts of data management things. And that's what anchoring is. It's just like keeping some data on a blockchain really easily. Yeah,
Right. Cool. Thanks for explaining. That makes sense.
that's all right.
So I had another question about your project, the LTO network. Uh, so one of the things that you had in your light paper was a metaverse. Is that something that you guys built, or are you building, and what plans do you have for that?
Oh, so the thing about Ownables is the perfect, in our view, uh, technology for digital assets in metaverses. The reason is because it's not centralized. One metaverse can use it, and so can another metaverse. And
Right.
you don't need the marketplace to help you connect to the asset itself, etc. So let's say you've got a sword in your wallet. You go to a metaverse that supports your class of sword or brand of sword, whatever, and you can use your sword there. Then you finish gaming for the day, you take it back, put it in your wallet. Tomorrow you want to go to another metaverse. You will then connect your wallet to that metaverse, and your sword is available there. So that's where our work with metaverse comes into play. So we're hoping that in the future, different metaverses support ownables natively. If they don't and they do it through NFTs, that's okay as well. Um,
Right.
but yeah, that's how we're looking. And we've actually been fortunate enough to connect with. There's like a standards body that is forming around metaverses. Things called the Metaverse Standards Group, and there's a number of we're part of that. There's
Yeah.
all sorts of there's like Nvidia, I think Microsoft, a lot of big companies, all part of this body, trying to figure out what the interoperability and the standards and the future of metaverses are going to look like. And
Yeah.
and that's where we fit in. We want to be part of that. We want to be the fabric of digital assets on the metaverse if we can. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super important, especially considering that you have there's a lot of complexity there, right? Because of course you're going to point to like an image or a video or whatever kind of file it is, but then how do you render that in a 3D space? Because I'm guessing you guys will have to work with like the metaverses that are out there with Decentraland to help you render that object in 3D or something. Like that
Yeah.
technology kind of blows my mind because I know how it I can understand like the technology, how you'd get it there, but how do you get it to display in a game? It's
So
wild.
like we see, like, let's say you've got an ownable for a sword. Okay. Let's keep using that example. Um, we're not sure how the standards are going to work, and this is what's being discussed at the moment. But let's say that in a there'll be some variation of this kind of thing where you will have a picture of the sword, like a PNG maybe. You might have a an OBJ file or some sort of 3D file. You might have
Right.
another type of 3D file. You might have an SVG of it. You might have a low bit, like GIF of it as well. So there'll be different versions of the same asset in the package, and it'll be applicable to different places. Because let's say you've got a 2D platform game that is a metaverse. Technically, it
Right.
doesn't. Metaverses don't have to be 3D. It's kind of like a world that people live in digitally. Uh, that they will want to use a different kind of asset than a 3D file. That a 3D file might be completely useless to them.
Huh.
So a creator will be like, "Hey, I want to create something that can be used in this, and this," and they will create that
Right.
all the different assets in mind.
Wow. So you could have the same object that's basically 2D or 3D or like anywhere in between. That's really cool.
Yeah. So essentially, it's a zip file. Which within we're figuring out what the capacity and the limitations of the file size are, but whatever they are, they end up being. We think it'd be a few hundred megabytes. Whatever they end up being, people will work within that and create as many useful assets as they can for that one thing. And they might not create multiple, but the metaverse standard stuff that we're talking about here, all these things are being discussed about what different formats, what different structures. Is there a way to have every type of metaverse look at the same file formats? And these are discussions which
Right.
will happen, and I think there will be multiple standards possibly in the future. Like there's no technology where the whole world is agreed on how to do it the one way, and when
Right.
companies and businesses are involved, things change very rapidly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're figuring out how that stuff works and planning ahead for it.
Cool. And is everyone available? Is everyone able to use your chain to build stuff on it, or do you have to go like invite only? And what kind of features can people use? I'm guessing some of them are built, some of them you're still building out.
Yeah, look, I mean, we made a post about a year ago, year and a half ago, saying that we're currently an island. So when we were doing the enterprise stuff, LTO was a public blockchain for LTO, the company, to use to build our own applications for companies. But what we are trying to do is be a properly decentralized blockchain, with a view for anybody who wants to come and build on our network can come and do so. We're creating the structures and the tools for them to do that. You can come and build on LTO, do whatever you want right now. Like it's open source. The documentation is there, etc. But in my view, once the ownables technology hits the main net, so currently it's on our test net with our software development kit, uh, that's when we'll probably start seeing the real growth happen. But right now, if you're a developer, we want you to come and test out. You can build some sample ownables. You can test the technology out. You can come and to our Telegram or into our Discord server. If you go to ownables.info, you'll be able to get all the links, hop in, have some tech chats. We're here to guide you, we're here to help you. It's really early days. Like we are on the bleeding edge of technology, which is really exciting. But I imagine what it was like, in those early Bitcoin forums and, like the mail groups that, existed when they were
Oh
trying
yeah.
to, yeah, like create that technology ecosystem, early days. So, yeah, if you're a developer, come and hop on in. We will support you. Where we just had a few discussions recently. We're going to be creating some sort of a developer fund, an incentive scheme to get developers to help create things on our network, and we will reward them for doing so. So there's a lot of ways that we're trying to support growth and invite developers. We want developers. Yeah,
Yeah, developers, please jump on.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's awesome, dude. Do you want to give your LTO's Twitter handle and website?
So if you go to twitter.com/the LTO network, and if you go to ltonetwork.com, or if you go to ownables.info, you'll be able to hop onto our channels and come get involved. We've actually got a really fun and very engaged community. Uh, yeah, if you're into like talking and banter and having fun with like community members, and if you really care about the tech, I think you'll enjoy being part of the LTO community groups.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I like exploring new technologies. That's kind of the reason to have this podcast. I like talking to people who build new things. So you might just see me on there as well, just shooting the breeze on the
Yeah, we'd
on
love to
Discord.
have you there. Yeah, I
Yeah, no,
think
it'd be
there's a
cool.
couple of metalheads in there as well, and like we're the original project team is Dutch, so there's a lot of Europeans across all of Europe, from the UK to the Netherlands, France, Switzerland, Eastern Europe. There's a lot of us, a lot of Turkish as well. So just come and yeah, hang out. It's a fun space, and we just love to talk tech. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That sounds ideal to me, man. Thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks a lot for the invite. Thanks a lot for taking the time to talk about the LTO network. It's genuinely been a pleasure.
Thank you. Good luck with your podcast. I think there's a brilliant thing you're doing. Thank you again.
Thank you, man. Have a nice day.
Is it bye?
See you, everybody.